F1 on BBC Radio 5 Sports Extra.
Hello and welcome to Albert Park Circuit here in Melbourne, Australia. The setting for the Australian Grand Prix tomorrow, and it's almost time to set the grid for tomorrow's race. The cloud cover that we've had all day long has finally cleared. We have blue skies above us here at Albert Park Circuit, and the paddock is excited and the expectation is rising as we head towards the qualifying hour here in Melbourne, Australia. The drivers are getting ready in the garages. I'm Rosanna Tennant down in the pit lane, and up in the commentary box we have Harry Benjamin, our lead commentator, alongside Mark Priestley, former mechanic for McLaren F1. And guys, it was tight in FP3, the final practice session earlier on today. Charles Leclerc, fastest of anyone ahead of Max Verstappen, but it was only 200ths. It was close, wasn't it? I have to say, are you excited for qualifying, Harry? Because I am.
I think we really are. That last practice session really lit our eyes up. Less than a tenth covering the top four. As you say, Leclerc, Verstappen, Sainz, Hamilton. That was how practice 3 ended, and really intriguing to see how the soft tyre is going to work when we get to Q3 as well. That will be the final part of qualifying where they have to use that red softest rubber. Ferrari have seemed bullish since the start of this weekend. There could be an upset here. It's not a Verstappen walkover just yet.
No, and I've been having a chat with some of the Red Bull Racing team, and they say this is such a fickle track. And Mark, what do they mean by that? Is it extra challenging than others we go to on the calendar? And as I'm walking through the paddock to the pit lane, it's a little breezy, so perhaps there are some other conditions that the drivers need to be aware of this afternoon as well.
Yeah, in the practice sessions yesterday, we saw the wind really making some problems for drivers. This generation of cars are very sensitive to wind or changes in direction of wind, so that could be an issue. The circuit is a kind of what they call a green circuit. It's not used for much of the year, so it evolves over the course of the weekend from being very, very low grip, and that grip builds gradually as the weekend goes on, as the rubber goes down. We can get dirt and dust and leaves and crisp packets and all sorts of things blowing onto this circuit because of that wind and because of its enclosed nature in the middle of a park. So all of these things provide challenges. Plus, of course, the actual circuit itself, it bites you as a driver. We've seen drivers making consistent mistakes right through all the practice sessions, and that really sets us up for a fantastic qualifying where everybody is going to be right on the limit of their grip and their performance, and the tiniest mistake can literally cost you a position at one end of the grid to the other.
And could even cost you millions of pounds when it comes to it at the end of the season, with points obviously paying out at the end of the season. Let's talk about Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, because at the end of yesterday's running, FP1 and FP2, Lewis Hamilton was fairly damning of the situation at the Silver Arrows, not happy with the setup direction they went in between FP1 and FP2. And then suddenly, end of FP3, Harry, Lewis Hamilton's P4 and George Russell P5. What's going on there? And I saw them making a few flap adjusts to their front wing. It can't have made that much of a difference, can it?
It's a rollercoaster ride with Mercedes. You never know quite where they're going to be in what session. I mean, this all starts with the issues coming into this weekend where with bouncing and loss of downforce and problems in the high-speed corners. That was the crux of the issues. But then, as you said, Hamilton seemingly affected worse this weekend compared to Russell. FP1, though, very happy, but then coming out with comments after free practice 2 saying this is the least confident he's ever felt with this car, and they went the wrong way with the setup in between FP1 and FP2. The changes were basically dramatically backfired. They've clearly, gone the other way now. He came alive on that soft compound tyre, and we saw him really pushing in practice as well, absolutely bringing the neck of that Mercedes round the final corner, which brings you onto the main straight. So perhaps that's reinvigorated him, and the times are tight. I think they're going to be optimistic now for qualifying.
Well, absolutely. It's a good time to be reinvigorated as we get towards the power hour here in Melbourne. Red light still flashing at the end of the pit lane, but the drivers are queuing up to get out of there. This is going to be a competitive session, and FP3 was nice and tight, so I'm really hoping for something similar in this session to set the grid for tomorrow's Grand Prix. And I have to say, the crowds are here in their tens and hundreds even of thousands. Absolutely packed out is Albert Park Circuit. I think the organisers are expecting somewhere near 450,000 people across the weekend. Last year it was 444,000, and everybody cheering on the local hero Oscar Piastri, and I have to mention Daniel Ricciardo, of course, but it seems that all focus on Oscar Piastri. The McLaren driver. What do we rate his chances of? And of course, his British teammate, Lando Norris. He has been struggling a little bit more than Oscar, it would seem.
Yeah, well, Piastri finished ahead of Lando at the end of free practice 3. Piastri scored his maiden points here last time out. This is his literal backyard. Grew up in Melbourne, grew up playing in Albert Park, and he's got the support of the crowd. And that home support does go a long way. But McLaren have been looking up there. Piastri's race pace was kind of on par with Leclerc and the Ferrari, so I think they'll be confident for the race. They're a bit behind. They're in a nip and tuck battle, I think, with best of the rest at the moment, with Aston Martin behind Ferrari. And we'll see about Mercedes now. They've kind of thrown a spanner into the works.
Absolutely, lots to keep an eye on. And Alex Albon, if you're wondering why there are only going to be 19 drivers taking part in this qualifying session, it's because Alex Albon has taken his teammate Logan Sargent's chassis for the remainder of the weekend. Alex Albon had a crash yesterday. The team were unable to sort that for FP2. They were also unable to then field 2 cars for the rest of the weekend. So Logan Sargent is sitting out. Albon's taken his chassis, but he's also taken his own engine and gearbox with him to that chassis. So we're going to watch on and see how Albon does. Sargent is going to watch, I'm sure, fairly frustrated at the situation, but that is why we have 19 drivers and cars on the grid for qualifying.
A lot of leaves on the track.
Albon, who is out there on the track, saying there are a lot of leaves on the track. We've had a bit of running in between the last practice session with Formula 2 on the track, but it was kind of carnage, so there might have been a bit of trees swept under the track with that, and of course the wind that's blowing, Rosanna.
And also, don't forget, it's autumn here, Harry.
Oh, and that one.
Yeah, that one, of course. So the leaves are tending to fall at this time of year. So Alex Albon out on track in that one remaining Williams. 19 cars getting ready to set their times for the grid for the Australian Grand Prix tomorrow. Harry Benjamin's in the commentary box alongside Mark Priestley, as I said. Guys, over to you. Let's get going in this qualifying session in Australia.
Thank you very much, and we are indeed nestled in the vibrant cityscape of Melbourne, the sporting capital of Australia, and it's the sparkling waters of the Albert Park Lake that glisten under the Australian sun, which is just peeking out from a little bit of cloud cover above. The circuit itself winding its way through the lush greenery that surrounds this temporary street circuit. 14 turns, 3.2 miles, 5.2 kilometres, 5 corners to the left and 9 to the right. The first part of qualifying already underway. 18 minutes of the clock already down to just over 15 minutes. Alex Albon on his way to finishing his first flying lap. Everyone sticking a soft set of tyres on, the softest rubber, and because we will not have a 20th car in the form of Logan Sargent, it will be the bottom 4 drivers who will be eliminated at the end of this session. But track a little bit dusty offline, a few leaves as Alex Albon was alluding to, but the tyre driver then coming across the line and goes fastest with his first lap time on the board, a 1:18.7. But big qualifying for Alex Albon, purely because of the pressure that he's sort of put himself under a little bit. I think the majority of people are understanding of why Logan Sargent has been stood down for this weekend. Alex Albon, it turns 28 today, is not going to want to put that car in the wall again this weekend, as he just has a little moment nearly doing so, and the run out of the turn 10 chicane.
Yeah, so one of the things we learned yesterday really was that these current generation of cars cannot ride the curves, particularly around here. If you step too far over a curb, it's exactly what happened to Alex. You lose control, you lose grip, the wheels get lifted off the ground, and you find yourself very quickly around Albert Park, particularly into a wall.
And if we can prepare for the second run, a darker visor, please.
Copy that.
That's Leclerc preparing, wanting a darker visor for his second run. So essentially he wants a darker shade of sunglass to keep that sun away from his visor.
Yeah, exactly. That's just a personal preference thing. The sun at a particular height in the sky that's causing him some issues, so he wants to darken that up, so that's fine, not uncommon. But with Alex Albon, yeah, there will be pressure on his shoulders. He's taken his teammate's car. Poor old Logan Sargent did nothing wrong, but ultimately the team have had to make a decision that is best for the team, and that is to go chasing the valuable 1, possibly 2 points that might become available if something happens to the front runners. And their best chance of doing that, unquestionably, is with Alex Albon, and that's why they've taken the decision. There will be some pressure on his shoulders though, so he can't get it wrong again. Let's hear from Verstappen.
So much on this here. Quite crazy.
So that's Verstappen complaining of understeer here, and we're into qualifying now. Normally you can hear Verstappen making changes and feeding back quite constantly throughout the practice sessions, but now that's dripping over into qualifying and just kind of almost confirms a little bit how Red Bull aren't all at ease here for qualifying.
Yeah, 100%. They haven't been comfortable throughout any of the practice sessions yet. We did see a good fast lap from Verstappen right at the end of FP3, but even the comments coming out of that team, the comments across the radio, they've not been happy, they've not been comfortable, still getting to grips with that car, and we're still hearing more of the same. Two major challenges with this first part of qualifying. One is that the circuit isn't going to be at its grippiest. It hasn't had any action on it for a little while. It's got dust and dirt and leaves all over it. That will clean up as the session goes on. It will get faster. And the other big problem, particularly in the first part of qualifying, is going to be traffic, particularly at the end of this session. All right, we've only got 19 and not 20 cars, but 19 cars all looking for a clear gap on this circuit could provide some real challenges, so keep an eye out for that.
You mentioned traffic, the stewards room already getting busy. Turn 13 incident, that's the final corner involving Perez and Hulkenberg, will be investigated after this session. That is to do with impeding, so that will be noted and investigated. That's the first issue that's popped up on the timing screen. Also, Alex Albon in his first lap in his Williams had the lap time deleted for track limits at turn 10 when he ran out wide all over the curbs. And we've just heard the sound of Esteban Ocon in the Alpine coming around the final corner and clipping the exit wall with his front left tyre. We've seen many cars get very, very close there throughout the weekend so far. Nobody's touched it as of yet, but Ocon becomes the first.
Yeah, he's actually got himself a puncture on the left rear as a result of that. So he came so close, he's actually caused damage to the car. So he's going to have to come back into the pits. That lap's effectively ruined, and it'll affect his run plan. So yeah, that was too close for comfort.
Okay, fastest lap time so far with 11 minutes on the board. It's the two Ferraris with Charles Leclerc on the 1:17.2 ahead of Sainz. Then comes Verstappen, Perez, Norris the top 5, Piastri, Alonso, Magnussen, Stroll, Hulkenberg the top 10. A reminder, this is Q1, the first of 3 qualifying segments, and we will eliminate the bottom 4 drivers this time around with only 19 drivers taking part. No Logan Sargent for the reasons that we have been talking about after he's been stood down for the remainder of the weekend, so Alex Albon can use his chassis. Hopefully he didn't have a spare once Albon had broken his after his huge shunt in practice. So 10.5 minutes to go. Still no lap times from Hamilton, Russell, Tsunoda, Ricciardo. They are all out there and coming through into the middle sector now. Hamilton, hoping to be reinvigorated by his practice 3 performance, was in a bit of no man's land at the end of FP2, but the man who has the most amount of poles around this track, 8 pole positions to his name. It might be a bit of a tough ask to get a 9th, but he'll want to be in the fight, and he certainly was at the end of practice 3. His teammate George Russell will come across the line before he does, round the final corner, gets close to the wall, doesn't clip it, the DRS wing flies open, Russell across the line, his opening gambit, only enough for 13th fastest.
It's not good enough for Mercedes, is it, at the moment? And they're another team that's not happy. We'll see what Lewis Hamilton can do. Pops himself up into 5th place, so a little bit more respectable. Behind the 2 Ferraris, behind the 2 Red Bulls. That's about as good as I think they can genuinely hope for at the moment. But this is a circuit that doesn't really suit the characteristics of their car. It's high speed, and that is Mercedes' biggest problem right now. It's high speed stuff. They're losing out on the straights. They can't cope through the high speed corners. This circuit's full of those.
Norris and Piastri, the 2 McLarens, are on good laps at the moment. In fact, Norris is just coming across the line at the moment and goes 3rd fastest. We'll see where Piastri comes out, and in fact I think Piastri just clips him and goes up into 3rd fastest. So the 2 McLarens backing up their pace. Right now it's the 2 Ferraris, then the 2 McLarens, then the 2 Red Bulls. Hamilton 7th, Alonso, Tsunoda and Magnussen the top 10, Bottas, Stroll, Hulkenberg, Ricciardo, Albon the top 15. Then currently in the elimination zone, it's the Sauber of Joe, the Mercedes of Russell and the 2 Alpines of Gasly and Ocon. Perez up into 2nd now in the Red Bull, gets closer to Leclerc, but it's still less than a 1/10 of a second between them. It's not a walkover here for the Red Bulls. They are being challenged in terms of 1 lap pace and challenging everybody. Fernando Alonso has gone 2.5 tenths clear at the top of the timings. It's only Q1. Verstappen next across the line. He slots into 2nd. Can't pip Alonso.
No, and this circuit is predictably, as we said, getting faster and faster and faster. And I think it's going to be one of those where you stay last, you come out last. Carlos Sainz is putting in a quick lap now. If you're there at the end of this session, if you can avoid the traffic and get a good clean lap, you've got a very good shot of moving up the order. This should be a fast lap from Carlos Sainz. Let's see where he's slopped in as he comes through the final sector, the final couple of corners. Coming across coming out the final corner now, Carlos Sainz. He goes top of the timesheets.
Carlos
really
Sainz
good lap.
Has been really finding his feet since tentatively dialing himself back in on Friday after his appendix surgery a couple of weeks ago, which forced him to miss the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. But he is now well and truly back on pace. But you're absolutely right, Mark, about the track evolution. Times will continue to get quicker. Leclerc finds more time. A couple of tenths back from his teammate Charles Leclerc, though. Pierre Gasly in the Alpine has just crossed the line to go 18th fastest. The two Alpines once again struggling here with a car that is off the pace. So Gasly and Ocon, the French duo, who of course came to blows here during the race in that chaotic 3 red flagged race, Australian Grand Prix from 2023, both falling out of points paying positions. What they would give to be in that position again this time around. It looks like it'll be a tough ask for the two Alpines, though. It's Gasly and Ocon along with Russell and Joe all in that elimination zone at the moment.
Yeah, so that's the first round of flying laps kind of done now. Most people now coming back into the pits for a fresh set of tyres, maybe waiting for a gap. And we're getting a picture building here, which is kind of the picture we thought we were going to get. Alonso slotting in currently in third. I guess that's one we didn't really predict, but he has been quick in qualifying over the last couple of rounds. But the two Ferraris, definitely the pace of the field right now. And as things stand, and we are early in this session, particularly early in qualifying, Verstappen and Perez not yet able to perfectly match. They went out earlier, so we'll give some credit for the track evolution, as we said, to the Ferraris. This is going to be close. This is definitely not the kind of domination we've come to, I guess, get used to from the Red Bulls. This is close, and at the moment I can't call it. I feel like Ferrari in a really good spot here.
Front brakes just don't really feel like they're working.
That's George Russell on the radio. He's back on another fast lap. His first attempt. I wonder if he was, perhaps struggling with brake issues, made a mistake or had some traffic, because it was only good enough for 17th fastest. He's finding time at the moment. It's about 2 tenths down on Carlos Sainz, who's currently fastest overall. But Russell now makes his way through the turn 9-10 chicane. The next DRS zone approaches. He slams onto the brakes into the 90-degree right-hander of turn 11. You run a little bit out wide. There's some yellow and green curbing before you're greeted with the gravel. Russell negotiates 11 and then 12. Then the left-hander of turn 13, which snakes round to the final corner, the right-hander, which brings him back into the sunlight that glints down on that Mercedes. A DRS ring flies open as he crosses the line. It's 9th fastest for Russell, just in front of his teammate Lewis Hamilton, but he's just about to cross the line now. Hamilton, let's see where he goes. He does improve, only up 1 spot, displaces his teammate. It's still a Mercedes in 9th and 10th, but this time it's Hamilton ahead of Russell. They're about 7 to 8 tenths off the pace of Carlos Sainz in these early stages of qualifying.
Yeah, so if you look at that grid order as things stand, or the order of qualifying as things stand, it's very much almost 2 by 2, isn't it, with teams? We're getting a fairly clear picture of how the team performance is. It's only the Fernando Alonso Aston Martin that's a long way separated from his own teammate Lance Stroll down in 8th, Alonso up in 3rd as things stand. Still with 4 minutes to go, of course, and all of this can and I'm sure will change. But we're getting a clear picture of, and I think it's a picture we kind of expected. It's Ferrari, it's Red Bull, it's McLaren, and then it's Mercedes further back. With
an Alonso thrown into the mix as well. We know Aston Martin have not been worried at all about their qualifying pace. It's their race pace that they've been wanting to improve, and Alonso can get the maximum out of any car he's in. So rest assured that he'll be showing the true pace of that Aston Martin and then some. Alonso currently 3rd, but this is the first segment of qualifying where we're looking to eliminate the slowest 4 drivers from this session, with only 19 drivers taking part. No Logan Sargent, and at the moment it's Daniel Ricciardo in the RB, Alex Albon in the Williams, Zhou Guanyu in the Sauber, and Esteban Ocon in the other Alpine, which are occupying those bottom 4 positions. This is the sound of Alex Albon round the final corner, up through the gears,
a great lap,
up into 8th, and it's a fantastic lap, which puts him 5th fastest for the tie.
That is a great lap for Alex Albon. He was on the limit. I was watching his lap from the onboard, thinking he's so close to disaster again, but he kept it together, crossed the line, and what a blistering lap, justifying many of the decisions the team have made, getting him into that position in the first place. Brilliant stuff.
Verstappen crosses the line, fastest in the first sector, goes 3rd fastest. Verstappen is the fastest first sector, Perez fastest in the middle sector, Sainz fastest in the final sector, and that is the top 3 drivers in this Q1 session at the moment. Sainz, Perez, Verstappen, Leclerc, Alonso, the top 5. This is the sound of Pierre Gasly. We're just seeing a replay of as he comes out of the pit lane. He's being investigated for failing to follow race directions instructions, and that is crossing the line at pit exit. And just at the end, when the line rejoins the track, I think he just moved out a little early, Mark.
It did look like it, didn't it? And unfortunately, it's one of those things, it probably didn't cost anybody anything, there's nobody around him, but he didn't follow the rules, and unfortunately that will, I'm sure, be some sort of slam dunk penalty, which is the last thing that anybody at the Alpine team need, because they are struggling in all senses of the word right now.
Stroll and Ricciardo jostling for some track position, going side by side in the approach to turn 11, trying to get the better position for their outlap. In the end, Stroll having to give that one up and backs off to let Ricciardo skate up the road. Outlaps taking place with 1:40 remaining on the clock. We'll get our final runs and see who will wind up as the slowest 4 drivers and eliminated from this session as we begin to set the grid for Sunday's Australian Grand Prix.
And Daniel Ricciardo with work to do, currently in the drop zone. Let's hear from Verstappen.
Still under steering too much. Especially just my front tyres already look great.
All good news today, Max. Thank you.
That's Jean-Pierre Lambiase, Max Verstappen's engineer, with the typical relationship that we know those two have. Not afraid to show a bit of sarcasm across the radio. But Verstappen clearly not happy, struggling with understeer. He's 3rd fastest at the moment. He's actually behind his teammate Sergio Perez, though there's absolutely nothing between them, mere thousandths of a second. But as you were saying, Mark, Daniel Ricciardo currently trying to put his final lap in. He's in the elimination zone at the moment. He's never been knocked out in Q1 at his home race. And this is the sound of the Aussie from Perth.
It is a decent lap that he's on. It's a personal best for him. I'm yet to see how it's going to compare to anybody else, but he's definitely putting in a better performance than he's done so far in this session. Oscar Piastri also going quickly further up the order.
Magnussen further down on the Haas gets himself up into 12th. That puts Ricciardo's teammate down to 13th. Tsunoda on lap at the moment. Ricciardo to the line, gets himself up into 10th spot, finds half a second on that lap. Bottas now right on the edge as it currently stands. He's in 15th in that fluoro green Sauber. The honorary Australian crosses the line and gets himself up into 13th. That knocks Hulkenberg down into the elimination zone. Tsunoda on the bubble. Hamilton only 11th. Can Zhou manage to get himself out? No, he can't. Crosses the line, 18th. Zhou Guanyu will be eliminated from this session. We're looking to see what Hulkenberg can do. Hulkenberg won't be able to do anything. He's not on a fast lap, and he's not showing good sector times. I don't think Hulkenberg's time is going to be enough to get him out. Can Tsunoda find himself with a bit more breathing space? Yes, he can. The Japanese driver gets his RB up into 7th. Ocon in the Alpine, the slowest car on the grid as it currently stands, gets himself out of the elimination zone and up into 15th. Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hulkenberg are out there on laps, but they're not lighting up the timing screens as it currently stands. Russell from 13th up into 6th. Ocon won't get another lap. He took the checkered flag in 15th. The checkered flag is now out, and Hulkenberg bailed out of it. It's the two Hasses who will not get out of Q1. Magnussen 16th, Hulkenberg 17th, Gasly 18th, and Zhou 19th. Scratch that. Daniel Ricciardo's lap has just been deleted. Disaster for the Australian on home soil with a lot to prove right now. He will start the Australian Grand Prix from 18th position in this race.
Where did I get this damage?
We assume maybe exit 10.
That's Zhou Guanyu, the Chinese driver for Sauber, who's got front wing damage, which might explain why he is 19th and last. His teammate, Valtteri Bottas, might manage to get through up into 13. But with a change with a deletion of Daniel Ricciardo's lap time right at the very end, this is the elimination. Nico Hülkenberg 16th, Pierre Gasly 17th, Daniel Ricciardo 18th, and Zhou Guanyu 19th. And Mark, it was at turn 5.
Yeah, and it's a slam dunk. He's not got any room to argue with that. All four wheels across the line. That was a terrible session for Ricciardo. He was struggling most of the session. He then put in a lap that moved him right up the order, but then after that his teammate pipped him, knocked his confidence, I've no doubt, again, and after that lap time that got him out of the elimination zones taken away. So the session went from bad to a little bit better, and then to way worse for Daniel, which seems to be the story of his season so far.
Rosanna, Ricciardo never knocked out in Q1 in Australia. Well, that changed today.
Well, do you know what, though? Daniel Ricciardo finished P18 in FP3, and Yuki Tsunoda has been comfortably ahead of him in all practice sessions in the weekend so far. So really disappointing stuff for Daniel Ricciardo, and there was a cheer as he crossed the finishing line to go through, and then of course as he lost his time, a lot of the Australian fans here shaking their head when they saw the news that he had lost his lap time. Also disappointing stuff for Zhou Guanyu. We heard him on the radio there, almost kind of confused as to where he got that damage, and I think that's really disappointing because Sauber had brought upgrades to this race, and it looks like he could have been on for a Q2 appearance. His teammate Valtteri Bottas doing a really good job to pull that Sauber through into Q2. So disappointing stuff for them, but good news for Kevin Magnussen in the Haas. Of course, he was a hot topic in Saudi Arabia, helping his teammate Nico Hülkenberg score a point, but he makes it through into Q2. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do with that Haas. Can he get any further up the grid? But yeah, disappointing stuff for Zhou Guanyu and Daniel Ricciardo.
Absolutely, yeah, that will come as a nice surprise for Magnussen when he was told on the radio. Both Hasses were out there on a final lap, but they weren't lighting up the timing screens. Magnussen then out qualifying his teammate Nico Hülkenberg. We're just about to see where Zhou Guanyu got his damage from, Mark, on the exit of turn 10.
Yeah, it's these brutal curbs around this circuit. He didn't hit a wall or anything, he just ran wide. The vibrations of the car meant that the front wing end plate on the left-hand side of the car just clipped, dug into the serrations of the curb, and a few moments later we saw it spiralling off into the distance. So that's cost him quite dearly in the end, as Rosanna was saying. I just want to say, let's take a moment to appreciate what Alex Albon did. He's got himself into P7 as things stand. If he can repeat a lap like that in the next session and somehow drag himself into Q3, wouldn't that just justify all of the efforts of everybody in that Williams garage that worked through the night, breaking the curfew to strip the bits from Logan Sargent's car, put them onto Alex Albon's car? Same for Logan, taking this sacrifice for the team. A very tough set of decisions that had to be made yesterday, all through the fault of Alex Albon, by the way, but he's gone some way just in that session to justifying and paying some people back.
Yeah, absolutely. Other drivers who will be happy with that performance in Q1. The Sauber of Valtteri Bottas made it through into the second part of qualifying. He's had a bit of a woeful start into this season. 2 16th place qualifyings so far, so this will be automatically his best qualifying. Esteban Ocon as well, a word for the Alpine driver, despite having an early bit of contact with the exit wall in the final corner, giving himself a puncture, managed to get back out there and made it through into Q2, and that will be the first time Ocon has got into Q2 this season after a 19th and 17th place qualifying so far. So a little bit of light for Alpine in their tunnel at the moment. Investigations coming thick and fast as well, failing to follow race directors' instructions when it comes to the maximum delta time. We see that quite regularly in qualifying, and that is a lot of drivers. It's Albon, Magnussen, Zhou, Perez, Ocon and Russell. And that's all about the delta time in terms of not going too slowly on your outlap, right, Mark?
Yeah, because everybody's looking for that crucial bit of space on the track, particularly in Q1 when everyone's out there at the same time. Everyone wants a clear lap. They want to get a clear run. So they tend to slow down. They tend to back each other up, particularly towards the end of the lap. And the race director sets a minimum time that has to be adhered to. And if people haven't done that, they could be in trouble.
Okay, we are through there in P15 as it stands.
You're joking?
No.
No.
Yep.
Amazing! Yeah. Feels like a bit of a victory that. Well done.
Well, that was Esteban Ocon in the Alpine. I mentioned that performance a moment ago. You would have thought he'd got pole position or something, but from that response, but he's only just made it through to Q2. But that just highlights the plight of Alpine at the moment, doesn't it? As his teammate Pierre Gasly didn't make it through.
It's desperate, isn't it? I mean, they are a team that's taken a giant step backwards, unfortunately. But for other teams down the back half, there's a real clear split, isn't there, in the grid right now, where the top 5 teams seem to be in a league of their own. The back 5 are in another group together, which means it's incredibly close. Which things like Yuki Tsunoda's performance there, catapulting himself up, where his teammate goes falls foul. Really do highlight the fact that one driver, one clear lap can make a very big difference if you get it right.
Q2 underway then, and we are already down to 14 minutes and 30 seconds as Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, who topped the first part of qualifying, straight out, first car on the road, not wasting any time. He's immediately followed out by Esteban Ocon on the Alpine. Then comes Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, the other Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, then the Williams of Albon, and the 2 Aston Martins, all beginning to peel their way back out onto this Albert Park circuit. We're in Melbourne for qualifying for the Australian Grand Prix on the southeastern tip of Australia, about 600 or so miles south of Sydney, in the sporting capital of the world, at this temporary street circuit. 3.2 miles, 14 turns, 5 to the left and 9 to the right. And Mark, this is a punishing circuit. We don't see too many of those anymore on the calendar.
No, and it's actually a real pleasure, isn't it, to watch the drivers being pushed to their limits. I mean, it shouldn't be easy, Formula One. It's the pinnacle of this kind of motorsport. And we saw a lot of drivers making mistakes, and we've seen some drivers being really punished for those mistakes when they do get it wrong. The walls are very close, but even on some parts of the circuit where you don't have walls, you've got gravel traps, you've got grass. There is a price to pay for getting things wrong, and I love it.
15 drivers then taking part in this session. We will eliminate everybody down from 11th to 15th come the end of the next 13 or so minutes as Carlos Sainz embarks on his first flying lap, once again out on the soft compound of tyre. Pirelli bringing their softest in the range this weekend, and that C5 soft tyre coming into this weekend was a bit of an unknown, but is lighting up this track at the moment as Carlos Sainz makes his way through that tricky left-hand kink of turn 7, which brings you onto the long sweeping right-hander of 7. Then it's a long roller coaster ride almost down through the third DRS zone, approaching speeds of almost 330 kilometers an hour before you tap onto the brakes into the left-hander of turn 9. The chicane brings you out through the right-hander of 10, the gravel to your left. Sainz gets as close as you dare before you make the run down to the 90-degree right-hander of turn 11. So far, nice and tidy, but Verstappen at the moment is eclipsing him in sector 1 and sector 2.
Yeah, it's this last part of the lap that Carlos Sainz is just completing now that really punishes the tyres when they've been working them hard all the way through. Let's see what he does. Carlos Sainz with a 1:16.6 puts him top of the timesheets at the moment, of course. He's the first to set a competitive lap time. But you're right, Verstappen on a very quick lap, and in fact, Verstappen eclipses that lap of Carlos Sainz, putting him top of the timesheets. But everybody going quickly as this circuit evolves.
By around about 3/10, Verstappen has gone quicker than Sainz. Ocon, the other driver to set a lap time, in third as everybody embarks out on the track. The only person who hasn't come out at the moment is Kevin Magnussen, who is still in the pit lane in his Haas, and Tsunoda in the RB, Bottas in the Sauber out there on their outlaps at the moment. Lando Norris in the McLaren, fastest of anybody in the first sector. Perez as well out there on a lap, has a decent middle sector too. We'll see what Perez has got as he comes towards the line imminently. But Norris, personal best in the middle sector as well. Perez faster than anybody. Stroll goes 6th fastest. A reminder, this is really a battle to get into the top 10 and secure your position for Q3. The bottom 5 drivers, the slowest 5 drivers from this session, will be eliminated. It's currently Verstappen, Sainz, Leclerc, Perez and Albon, the top 5. This is the sound of Lando Norris coming down the main straight now, crosses the line. His first flying lap is enough for 4th fastest, just in front of Sergio Perez. Hamilton out there, so is Piastri. Hamilton round the final corner now.
Yeah, so good stuff. This circuit is getting quicker and quicker and quicker, which is what we expect. Piastri on a very fast lap at the moment. Let's see how that one rolls to a conclusion as he comes to the final part of the lap now, Piastri. I don't think it's going to be quick enough to trouble the front runners, but it's a decent lap from him. 16.6 puts me into 2nd. Just looking at the lap times and the tyre information that we've got here, Verstappen set his lap that currently sits at the top of the table on a brand new set of soft tyres. Both Ferraris, so Leclerc and Sainz, are on used soft tyres. So there is a bit of a difference in tyre life when it comes to the two different teams and their approach at this point. These are like a banker lap, of course, early in the session. When it comes to the latter stages, that's when it really matters. That's when things get really on the edge, and we will see teams, I'm sure, sticking brand new tyres on and really giving it absolutely everything.
Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin across the line. The 2006 race winner goes 9th fastest, just in front of Alex Albon. And on that lap though, Alonso slipping and sliding that Aston Martin as the sun glints off of the racing green livery as he makes his way back through turn 1. In the elimination zone then at the moment, and at risk of finding themselves out of qualifying, is the RB of Yuki Tsunoda in 11th. Valtteri Bottas is Sauber. The Alpine of Esteban Ocon. George Russell currently down in 14th, but this is the sound of the British racer coming round the final corner now with a best qualifying result of 2nd here back in 2023. Crosses the line, goes 7th fastest in this session. That puts Albon down into 11th. So it's Albon, Tsunoda, Bottas, Ocon's on an outlap, and Magnussen is now completing his first flying lap for the Dane, who just made it through into the second part of qualifying after Daniel Ricciardo's lap time got deleted, absolutely ragging that Haas through the turn 9-10 chicane. A plume of dust coming out from the rear as he makes his way through the right-hander of turn 11. 10 years Kevin Magnussen made his debut here in a McLaren and got onto the podium, the first driver in a McLaren to do that since Lewis Hamilton. He hasn't been able to stand on the podium since then. Crosses the line. It's enough for 13th fastest in the Haas at the moment.
Not enough to get him out of that elimination zone, unfortunately, but this is kind of the picture that we're seeing. Most drivers now finding their way back into the pits. This is the lull that we always get mid-session. First lap's done, everybody comes back in, fresh set of tyres, little chat with the engineer, a download of data and information, maybe a little tweak to front wing flaps. Very little you can do to the car at this point in the session. We're under parc fermé conditions as soon as everybody rolls out of the garage for the start of qualifying. That limits the amount of work you can do. So all of the practice sessions, tweaking and setting up the car, they've all been getting the car ready for this moment right now, and this is where it counts. A lot you can do now other than leave it up to that driver.
Absolutely. That was the voice of the former F1 mechanic for McLaren, Mark Priestley, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin. You're listening to qualifying for the Australian Grand Prix at the moment, at risk of elimination in this Q2 session as Albon, Tsunoda, Magnussen, Bottas, Ocon. We've already eliminated the slowest 4 drivers from the Q1 session, and Rosanna Tennant. One of them was one of the home heroes, Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah, and he's looking super disappointed, Harry. I've just spoken to Ricciardo, and he was just so downbeat, as you might imagine, saying this is just salt in the wound. And he said he feels sceptical about a few things still, so I'd love to know what he's really meaning there. He says he believes he should be faster than Yuki Tsunoda, his teammate. We're going to have his interview with me on the Checkered Flag podcast later on, so make sure you check that out. But yeah, very disappointed Daniel Ricciardo at the moment. He said it was so emotional driving this circuit in front of the home crowd. different kind of emotions, I think, this afternoon.
Absolutely. Well, it will now be 3-0 to Yuki Tsunoda when it comes to qualifying at the beginning of this season. 3 qualifyings we have had, and all 3 have gone the way of the young Japanese racer, who is currently 12th fastest in that elimination zone. Across the line, though, with 6 minutes to go, Carlos Sainz has laid down the marker, a 1:16.1. Lovely lap from Sainz, fastest of anybody in the first and third sector.
That was a really good lap from Carlos Sainz. I was watching it as best I could as he went round, and it was just under control. It was good in all 3 sectors, as you say, fastest of anybody, first and third, but he kept that pace up to that crucial middle sector as well, which delivered a lap time that's 2 tenths quicker than that Max Verstappen was able to do on those fresh tyres earlier on. Here comes Sergio Perez to complete his lap. I don't think it's going to be quick enough to trouble Sainz as he crosses the line now. Only good enough for 4th, a 1:16.6 for Sergio Perez.
Certainly is intriguing to see how this battle at the top is unfolding. The other Ferrari of Leclerc comes across the line, 3rd fastest for the Monegasque, but with 5 minutes just over that remaining of Q2, it's all eyes on escaping the bottom 5 positions. The bottom 5 slowest drivers will be eliminated from 11th to 15th, and that is where they will start Sunday's Grand Prix from.
Keep an eye on the lap that Alex Albon is on right now, because he is going very quickly, currently in 11th, so just inside that drop zone, but this is a lap that could well catapult him up the order, and what a story that would be if he can get this into Q3.
Certainly would be. Just behind him in that elimination zone is Tsunoda, Magnussen, Bottas and Ocon. For the time being, Alonso is on the bubble in the Aston Martin in 10th as he makes his way in that Aston Martin and embarks on another flying lap through turns 1 and 2, keeps it nice and planted for the Spaniard, heads towards turn 4, the scene of that huge crash back in 2016 when he was in a McLaren versus the Haas of Esteban Gutierrez. It was back then a huge incident for Alonso, walked away from that, powering his way around this 3.2 mile track.
And it wasn't quite enough for Alex Albon. He just lost a bunch of time in the final sector, and he still remains in P11.
Less than half a tenth.
Yeah, half a tenth with just under 4 minutes to go. Is there anything left in that Williams? Is there anything that might just give a smile back onto the faces of those people in the Williams garage that have worked so hard to give him this shot?
Stroll's out there as well at the moment. He's currently 9th. He's coming into the middle sector at the moment. So the 2 Aston Martins out there putting a lap. The top 7 at the moment are all in the pits, although they're just starting to come out for their outlaps ahead of their final flyers. Russell and Hamilton make their way out in the Mercedes. Let's see what Alonso's got towards the line. The Spaniard takes it, moves himself up into 7th spot.
It's a decent lap from Alonso. I think the fact that they've been so good in qualifying probably says a lot about why I feel a tiniest bit disappointed with that. I thought we might just get a little bit of magic that might put him right up inside the top 5. But P7 at the moment, with still 3 minutes to go, that's a decent position for Alonso. If he can hang on to that, of course, that'll take him through to Q3, and I'd love to see him in the mix against the rest of these top runners come the end of this session.
His teammate Stroll's just crossed the line as well, hasn't improved his position, went slightly quicker, stays 10th fastest, 2.5 minutes left then of Q2. It's Sainz fastest ahead of Verstappen, Leclerc, Piastri, Perez the top 5, Norris, Alonso, Russell, Hamilton, Stroll the top 10. They are all currently safe, but with still 2 minutes and 19 seconds remaining, all at risk. And in the elimination zone at the moment, it's Alex Albon in the Williams, Yuki Tsunoda in the RB, Kevin Magnussen in the Haas, Valtteri Bottas in the Sauber, and Esteban Ocon in the Alpine.
As everybody now starting to wind their way out of the pits, build up their temperatures, get the tyres up to temperature, everything getting prepared on this outlap for the one final shot that everybody has at trying to get themselves into the top 10. The first person to set a representative lap time is going to be Lewis Hamilton. We're watching on our screens right now. He's gone for the first sector and he has improved on his own time. He's around 4 tenths down on the ultimate time of Carlos Sainz, but he is making improvements, and that's what he needs to do right now. Currently sitting in P9. I don't think that's going to be good enough to keep him there by the end of this session. So an improvement's what he needs, and that's what he's doing so far.
Albon and the Williams isn't going to go out for another lap either. He set that lap and then came into the pits, and with 1 minute and 21 seconds remaining, he is still in the pits, so he won't get out to do a lap, so he will not make it through, but he's got to keep a lot of people behind him, including Tsunoda, who's just started the first sector and had a good start as well in that sector. Purple mini sectors. Kevin Magnussen coming into the final sector now, finding time is the Dane. The Sauber of Bottas also on a lap, as is the Alpine of Ocon. This is the sound of Lewis Hamilton. Finds time but doesn't improve his position, stays 9th.
Lost it all in the penultimate corner, turn 13. Massive amount of understeer, huge correction on the steering wheel, visibly cost him time. I think he was running out of lap time, running out of performance towards the end of the lap anyway, but that little moment possibly cost him a move further up the order.
Magnussen's finding a little bit of time. I'm not sure it's going to be enough to get out of the elimination zone. He finds time, but it's not enough. Moves himself up into 12th. That'll be all the Dane can do. Albon clings on to 11th for the time being. We look to Tsunoda, Bottas and Ocon, currently 13th, 14th and 15th. Bottas will be first to cross the line as Alonso gets himself up into 6th. What can the Finnish driver do? The honorary Aussie, he splits Albon and Magnussen. The Sauber gets up into 12th. Can Ocon do anything? No, he stays 15th. Looking to Yuki Tsunoda, his teammate, knocked out in Q1. Can he rescue anything for the RB team? Yes, he can. Yuki Tsunoda up into 8th position. Fantastic lap from the Japanese driver. That puts Hamilton right on the bubble, and with Stroll getting up into the top 10, that knocks Hamilton out of Q2, and he won't get another lap in time.
No, that is hugely disappointing for Lewis Hamilton, and it was all about that one lap there just a few moments ago where he overcooked his tyres, lost all that time in the final couple of corners, and it's ultimately cost him a position in the final part of qualifying. Whilst all that was happening, Leclerc put in a lap that was quicker than Verstappen, which leaves the table looking like Sainz at the top, Charles Leclerc right behind him. It's the two Ferraris with Verstappen in 3rd.
Hamilton, the 8th-time pole position here, out.
Are we safe or not? Negative. No, we've just been bumped.
As he comes into his pit box, shaking his helmet, Hamilton will at best start the Australian Grand Prix from 11th on the grid, in front of Alex Albon in the Williams in 12th, the Sauber of Valtteri Bottas in 13th, the Haas of Kevin Magnussen in 14th, and the Alpine of Esteban Ocon in 15th. Just when it was looking like things might be turning up for Lewis Hamilton at the end of free practice 3, Hamilton 11th, about half a tenth separated him from that top 10 position, and it was Russell who was only just through with a whisker, and it all came undone in the penultimate corners.
Yeah, he came across a little bit of traffic, but he was fighting the steering wheel. He was all over the place, really correcting a little bit of understeer, and that just loses his time. The front end just sliding across the track. There's no way you're going faster when the front end is sliding like that, and you're overcorrecting, pointing the steering wheel in a completely different direction to where you want to go. It just costs you lap time. It's the most frustrating thing as a driver, and ultimately it's been a very disappointing result for him.
End of Q2 then, and out goes Hamilton, Albon, Bottas, Magnussen and Ocon. Next up, the battle for pole, and it's looking tight, Rosanna.
It is looking tight. The two Ferraris fastest in that part of qualifying, and the optics there, wow, that makes for interesting reading, doesn't it? Lewis Hamilton P11 and the two Ferraris out front. I bet Sir Lewis Hamilton is hoping 2025 comes a little quicker when, of course, he's going to make the move to the Maranello-based team Scuderia Ferrari. And just a word on Hamilton's qualifying this season so far: P9 in Bahrain, P8 in Saudi Arabia, and then now P11. It doesn't make for good reading, does it? I was standing in the media pen watching that part of qualifying, as was Daniel Ricciardo, who I've already spoken to, but he was watching his teammate Yuki Tsunoda, who had a great session there, finishing P9, so he makes it through into Q3. But Daniel Ricciardo will be so disappointed, given he felt after yesterday's running FP1 and FP2 they could make Q3. Of course his teammate has, he has not.
Extra salt into that already open wound for Daniel Ricciardo, and to reiterate, the Hamilton being out in 11th, out in Q2 for the first time in Australia since 2010, back in his McLaren days, and out qualified by his teammate George Russell. This will be for the 5th consecutive race
Well, he has been out-qualified for Russell, but only just. I mean, Russell just about sneaks through in P10. Hamilton doesn't make it through in P11. And it is a sign of where Mercedes are at around this circuit. We said earlier it's not a circuit that suits their car. The car is a bit of a struggle, a bit of a handful anyway. They haven't got to grips with it, haven't got used to it. They don't understand it well enough yet to get the best out of it. It's such a frustrating situation from a driver perspective. And on this particular occasion, it's Lewis that sees the worst end of that by not making it through to the final part of qualifying.
Well, as we await for the final part of qualifying, it will be the two Ferraris of Sainz and Leclerc, the two Verstappens, I nearly said.
Oh, that's a Freudian slip.
The two Red Bulls of Verstappen and Perez, the two McLarens of Piastri and Norris, the two Aston Martins of Alonso and Stroll, and the sole remaining Mercedes of George Russell and the sole remaining RB of Yuki Tsunoda. And at the moment, based off of the last two qualifying sessions, it's going the way of Ferrari, unless Verstappen suddenly pulls out a Verstappen lap.
It's mighty close, isn't it? I think that's what we read from all this. It's mighty close. I don't know which way it's going to go. I think Ferrari have topped the timesheets more often than not here, but not by very much, and they set their laps at slightly different times in the session as well, so not necessarily exactly representative of each other or comparable to each other. I don't know how this is going to go. I really don't. I think that's brilliant, because we haven't really been saying that for some time. We've always looked at Verstappen and said, yeah, he'll pull it out the bag. You know, this is where it really matters. This is where he'll dial things up a little bit and off he'll go. He may well still do that, but I can be pretty sure that it's not going to be by much if he does.
Also, in the Ferrari camp, Sainz will be boosted by this, won't he? Because he's actually looked the more comfortable of the Ferrari drivers all of a sudden. Yeah. Leclerc's right there, but Sainz has had a tenth or so in hand for most of this qualifying so far. And normally, we know Leclerc is outright quicker than Sainz on one lap. At the moment, it's swinging Sainz.
And it was a really good lap from Carlos Sainz as well. And by that, I mean under control, measured. We've already talked about these soft tyres having to be kind of managed over the course of a qualifying lap. If you take too much out of them in the early sectors, you struggle towards the end. We've seen a number of drivers do that. Carlos seemed to have it under control and have that balance just about perfect throughout the entire lap. And the result was a really, really good lap time.
And what has been a bit of a bogey track for Carlos Sainz. Best qualifying of 5th in 2023. Best race result of 8th back in 2017. And you remember, a tough race last year with the penalty right at the very end, which plummeted him out of the points when we finished under safety car, and then the race before that, I think he had a bad qualifying, and then he had an all right qualifying, but he fell all the way back to the back of the field and span out into the gravel in the turn 9-10 chicane on the second lap. So things starting to look up a little bit for Carlos Sainz. Well, now he's minus an appendix.
Well, I was going to say, just 2 weeks ago, let's not forget, he had his appendix out, but there is nothing that motivates a racing driver like some young gun stepping into the seat, setting the world alight with the greatest story of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. The sort of press column inches have only just finished talking about Ollie Behrman. Carlos Sainz needs to wrestle those back to his own side of the garage.
And so far, he is doing that in style as we await for the next session to start, and those in the grandstands also waiting as well. Smiles on everybody's faces, cheering their home heroes. Sadly, no Daniel Ricciardo. He was knocked out in Q1. They still have Oscar Piastri at the moment, who did finish that session in 4th fastest. So Piastri continuing to look good around here as well, so giving some hope for the Aussies in the grandstands.
Yeah, and I think with Piastri especially, we said earlier on that his race pace from the long run yesterday in FP2 looked really, really strong and even comparable with the likes of Ferrari. So if he can put the car in a decent place on the grid in this final session, his race tomorrow actually might well look like it's in a decent position. And wouldn't that be a great story if Oscar Piastri can put that little orange McLaren into a really great spot come the end of the race. This is often a race of attrition, by the way. If you can get to the end with some strong pace, who knows what you might be able to pick up.
Yeah, there is a 60% chance of a safety car, and the red flag percentage went up massively after we had 3 in one race last year. So you never quite know what you're going to get in Albert Park. It always throws something up come race day. But back out then for the final part of qualifying in this power hour. 11.5 minutes on the clock. 10 of the fastest cars remain as we set the grid and battle it out for pole position for the Australian Grand Prix. And Oscar Piastri, the sole remaining Aussie, peels out from his McLaren garage, pins his visor down as he makes his way towards the end of the pit lane and out into the sunshine that is currently glistening down on this Albert Park track. Air temperature 18.5 degrees, track temperature 34 degrees. There is a bit of wind speed as well. It's something they've had to be dealing with since the start of the weekend, really. And we know you can also get a little bit of debris, foliage that drifts onto the track because we are racing in a park with greenery, shrubbery, trees overlooking and casting shadows across the tarmac. And it's something you've got to deal with.
It's often an issue here, and I've been in races where, you know, during pit stops you're having to sort of scoop stuff out from the radiator ducts, from out of the brake ducts, because particularly in a race situation you can't have these really essential cooling ducts over the long period of a race situation being blocked, restricting that airflow. So it is something that teams keep an eye on. Of course, they've got sensors everywhere that keep very close tabs on temperatures, and they'll know when there's an issue that needs addressing. But it is a feature of this circuit. But actually some of the other features of this circuit are what are generating a number of mistakes. It's the curbs, it's the sort of low grip nature of it, it's the bumpy nature of it, it's the walls very close to the racetrack, the gravel traps and grass. All of these features of this track really do push the drivers, and these are the best drivers in the world, they're in the best cars in the world, but as we've seen over the last couple of days, they still make mistakes, and this circuit really punishes you when you do.
It certainly does. And Carlos Sainz then on his first flying lap just made his way out through turn 4 and ran onto the slightly raised curb that's on the exit there. Sparks flying, it really pitched him up there on the underside of that Ferrari. But Sainz has been looking quick so far and going for what could be his 6th career pole position in his final season with Scuderia Ferrari before he makes way for Lewis Hamilton. Sainz's future still up for grabs, but having had to sit out of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix a couple of weeks ago, back and ready for more here in Australia, and so far proving to be back on the pace straight away. And he is the first man out on the track at the moment, coming through the final right-hand corner, slings it into the right-hander. You're greeted with the DRS line, the drag reduction system, the rear wing flap rises up and then slams shut under braking as he goes through towards turn 1. Fastest lap time on the board so far from Sainz, a 1:16.3.
Yeah, decent lap time from Sainz. I still think that'll be improved as the session goes on. George Russell is about half a second behind him. He's currently second, but that's 16.8, around 5/10 in that. We're going to get Charles Leclerc crossing the line next. He's gone quickly, but about a 10th behind his teammate, puts him in second. But it's Verstappen who's gone purple in the first sector, purple in the second sector, and just over 2.5 tenths up on the leader Sainz at the moment with 1 sector to go.
Yeah, Verstappen looking mighty. Piastri's finding himself a good lap as well as Tsunoda goes up to 4th. Piastri crosses the line in his McLaren, puts himself up into 3rd. Verstappen coming through the final sector now. He's just been pipped actually in the middle sector by his teammate Sergio Perez, who's gone fastest of anybody in the middle sector. Verstappen to the line now, 7 minutes and 45 seconds on the clock, goes nearly 3/10 clear at the top. Provisional pole for Max Verstappen, a 1:16.0. Then it's Sainz, then it's Leclerc, then Norris, Piastri the top 5, but Perez has had a mighty middle sector, but he's lost it in the first and final sectors. It's only enough for 4th fastest.
Yeah, that was disappointing in the end for Perez. He's 4/10 off his teammate, and the first part of the lap and the middle part of the lap especially looked really, really good. So this is still about finding out where you can push and where you can't. As we said earlier, the circuit's continuously evolving. Big moment from Alonso through the gravel, kept it out the wall.
What? Lost the car in 6.
That could have been big.
The same scene where Alex Albon suffered his huge crash in the Williams in practice on Friday, but Alonso bailing out of the corner and trundling across the gravel as the Aston Martin gets bounced up and down. He rejoins the track and then comes straight into the pit lane. So no lap time set from either of the Aston Martins. Alonso and Stroll down in 9th and 10th at the moment, but everyone has set their opening lap times elsewhere. It's Verstappen who's fastest, Sainz, Leclerc, Perez, Norris, the top 5. Then it's Piastri who's just been on the radio saying check the floor on the left side for damage as he peels into his pit box. Russell 7th, Tsunoda 8th, and then the 2 Aston Martins.
Yeah, so the Ferraris need to find around 3/10 between them, just under 3/10 for Sainz, a little bit more, 3.8 for Charles Leclerc, if they're going to have any hope of troubling Verstappen. I feel like that's doable. I don't feel like that lap from Verstappen is so far ahead that it's not matchable, and if anyone can match it, it will be the Ferraris. They haven't quite strung the perfect lap together yet. We do have, of course, another run to come as we see the replay of Oscar Piastri running over that same curb that took the front wing end plate off Yuki Tsunoda's car in the early part of qualifying. These are brutal, these curbs, and with the cars being so stiffly sprung in the modern era, the vibrations and the bouncing and the brutality that both the car and driver feel really are quite extreme.
And in that first run, Verstappen fastest of anyone in the first sector. Perez had the fastest middle sector. Sainz had the fastest final sector. So if you're searching for the dream lap, well, those are your 3 drivers who managed to put it together. So good news, actually. So it's not Verstappen. There is strengths and weaknesses amongst the top contenders in this field, but this is a battle for pole between Ferrari and Red Bull.
Yeah, 100%. And it's also, a feature of these very soft tyres, one step softer than we had at this same circuit last year. They're so soft that I don't think anyone's going to be able to go purple. I don't think anyone's going to be able to set the fastest lap time in all 3 sectors. You've almost got to choose. You've got to find the strengths and weaknesses of your car. Are you better off pushing really early on in the lap to maximise what your car's able to do in the first sector, but then perhaps manage the tyre through the middle sector and towards the end? Or is it better the other way around? And we have got very different characteristics between the Red Bull and the Ferrari. The lap time they can generate ends up being very, very close, or it certainly has this weekend, and that's what's so exciting about this. I still think the picture that we're seeing on our sheets at the moment, Verstappen, Sainz, Leclerc, Perez, I think that's got every possibility of turning around before we get the final checkered flag at the end of Q3 in just over 4 minutes' time.
Yeah, running slightly out of sequence, the 2 Aston Martins, the Aston Martin of Lance Stroll, who didn't come out initially. Alonso did, and then had that off at turn 6 and then came in at the end of that lap. But Stroll, the Canadian racer for Aston Martin, embarking on his first flyer of this session with that set of soft compound tyres on. Lance Stroll makes his way out, qualified 12th and 10th so far this season, qualified 6th here back in 2023. That's his best qualifying around Albert Park. Followed that up with a race to 4th place. It was actually his best result of the season here last year. So a track that he's got some good memories of, and he makes his way now in the roller coaster ride, the slight left-hand kink on the straight that approaches turn 9, that far chicane where so many are running out wide on the exit of 10 and being greeted by the green and yellow curbing and getting pitched up. It's
He had a bit of a moment actually coming through that very far chicane of turns 9 and 10. Big old twitch. I'm sure we'll see an onboard replay of it soon, but it will have cost him a bit of time. He's still going quicker. In fact, he hasn't set a lap time yet, has he? So this is... It's not going to be, I don't think, quick enough to trouble any of the front runners. He's heading for the line now. Crosses it with a 1:17.2. Not good enough.
Yeah, does get off the 10th spot, but only enough for 8th fastest, and this is the sound of the moment he had coming into the left hand of turn 9, and it was actually a bit more of a moment than it looked off cockpit cam. Really wrestling with the wheel, nearly lost the rear end.
Yeah, that was a massive sort of what you call a tank swapper. back in the day, where he's literally sort of soaring at the steering wheel, having to fight it, the car at sort of 45-degree angle to the angle that he wants it to go in. But luckily he managed to recover it and see the lap out. So there's a lot of time left on the table there, and that will be, I guess, encouraging for the likes of Fernando Alonso in the sister car that's heading out now, warming up his tyres, building up temperature. Carlos Sainz sitting at an odd angle there as we joined him on board with our pictures. Did he have a little moment, or was he just warming up tyres?
We'll wait and see. He's just finding himself a bit of space on the track, but just over a minute and a half left then of qualifying for the Australian Grand Prix. It's Red Bull versus Ferrari in the battle for pole position. Right now it's advantage Max Verstappen, who is going for back-to-back pole positions. Can Carlos Sainz, who's looked quick all throughout qualifying so far, get his first pole position around Albert Park? Can Charles Leclerc get his second pole position around this track? He's third fastest at the moment, and don't rule out Sergio Perez either. But Sainz coming through the exit of turn 5, just having a little moment over the bumps. That would have cost him a bit of time. He's still fastest of anybody in that first sector at the moment. Perez finding time as well, coming through the middle sector at the moment. Verstappen will cross the line in front of them, and he is finding time left, right and centre. You cannot rule the reigning champion out, the man who has dominated every race so far this season and dominated the last couple of years of Formula One. But so far this weekend, things have not looked like a complete walkover. Carlos Sainz is really pushing that Ferrari, almost touching the grass with his wheels. Verstappen will cross the line first, to the line, finds time, improves by a tenth of a second into the 1:15s. It's a 1:15.9. Sainz round the final corner, still fastest of anybody in the first sector. Perez gets up into second. What can Sainz do? It's not enough. Only enough for second. What's Leclerc saying? He's not finding enough time either. It's a bit of a so-so lap for Charles Leclerc. Piastri up into fifth. Lando Norris comes round the final corner in the McLaren. What can he do? Can he pip his Aussie teammate? Yes, he can. And he pips Leclerc for the time being. Norris up to fourth. Leclerc is not having a good lap in his Ferrari. Russell crosses the line in seventh. Leclerc having such a bad lap, he bails out of it, and he'll qualify down in fifth, behind the McLaren of Norris and just in front of Piastri in the McLaren.
That is not the picture that I thought we'd be looking at as the checkered flag came out to end this session. Max Verstappen taking pole, maybe not a big surprise, but the fact that Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc weren't able to get really anywhere near him. Carlos Sainz actually had a decent lap, Sergio Perez had a decent lap, but Charles Leclerc absolutely nowhere when it really mattered. What a great lap though from Lando Norris.
Fantastic, but celebrations once again go to Max Verstappen, third consecutive pole position in 2024. He will start the Australian Grand Prix from pole. Carlos Sainz will line up alongside him in his first race back after missing the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. In the end, it was just over 2.5 tenths between them. Perez third, Norris fourth, Leclerc the top five, Piastri is sixth, Russell seventh, then comes Tsunoda in the RB eighth, ahead of the two Aston Martins, Stroll ahead of Fernando Alonso.
Thank you very much, Harry Benjamin and Mark Priestley. Guys, I don't know, as you said, Mark, that wasn't the picture you were expecting to see at the end of the qualifying session. Are you a little disappointed that perhaps Max Verstappen took pole after all those practice sessions where it looked like it might be going the way of Scuderia Ferrari?
I mean, I don't mind Max Verstappen getting pole, but I'm disappointed that it wasn't closer. I'm disappointed we didn't get a real nip and tuck battle all the way to the end. It was like the Ferraris just let themselves, each other and us down, is how it feels. Let's hear from Leclerc. Oh, no team radio coming, sorry, we missed that. But
he's obviously got an opinion about what was going on though, Mark, and to bail out, as you say, and Ferrari have been particularly strong in that final sector, so you sort of thought they might have been able to hang it all together for these Q3 laps on this soft tyre, but not to be for Charles Leclerc this afternoon.
It was just too scrappy. It was almost like it just the pressure or whatever it was, but we've seen him so under control, so comfortable with that car all the way through the weekend, not even just qualifying, but through the weekend, but not today.
What, He's already here in the media pen waiting to talk to the media. No PR person with him. So I think he's obviously in a...
Quick, Rosanna, go.
Oh, no, here she comes. She's running. Mia is running to accompany Charles Leclerc, but he's obviously a little bit frustrated, to put it mildly. But can we have a word for Carlos Sainz? Fresh from having his appendix taken out, he's lighter, he's faster, he's taken it to the front row.
You know what? When a driver gets sacked, suddenly they come alive. Not that Sainz was under pressure, but you know what? When he was here at Bahrain, qualified fourth, and finished on the podium, beat teammate Charles Leclerc, had to miss Saudi Arabia to come back from that, and he really dialed himself into this weekend as well. He wasn't that quick in practice, got quicker and quicker and quicker. He was in the battle for pole. In the end, he did miss out, but we got a good fight for it along the way.
We certainly did, and I think a word for the McLarens, because at the end of FP3, Oscar Piastri was P8 and Lando Norris P10. What a turnaround in form. Lando Norris P4 and Piastri P6. So I imagine Norris will be pretty chuffed that he's ahead of his teammate once again, having been out-qualified last time in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, he will be very happy about that, but I think McLaren in general can be reasonably comfortable and reasonably happy with the general position that they're in fourth and sixth, with a car that we know is very good in race pace. I don't think they're looking too bad for tomorrow.
No, absolutely not. And Lewis Hamilton unable to make it through to Q3. His teammate George Russell up there in P7. It's been a difficult weekend for Lewis Hamilton. How can he remedy things tomorrow in the race, Harry? Where do you see the opportunities? Are there any?
Well, 4 DRS zones around this track, very powerful stuff. And since they made those track changes a couple of years ago, they've widened certain parts of this circuit, so overtaking is a little easier. I think we're going to be in for a good one, Rosanna.
Yeah, I hope we are. I'm hoping it's going to be a really good race. Perhaps not quite as chaotic as last year with those 3 red flags. But who's your money on then? Are you thinking Max Verstappen can go all the way? Just quick one-word answer.
Yes.
Sainz going to do it.
And you think Sainz is going to do it?
Down the inside of turn 1.
Oh, you've called it already. Mark Priestley, Harry Benjamin in the commentary box. Thank you so much for talking us through the qualifying session. I've been Rosanna Tennant down in the pit lane. Join us tomorrow for the Australian Grand Prix. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.